Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we're going to discuss important issues appearing in the Hindu newspaper dated 24 July 2018. Let's begin. The first news appears on page number 1 and also appears as a continuation on page number 10. The news reads Alwar fallout, government panel to check cases of mob lynching. Ministers group to study report and submit suggestion. So as we are witnessing that instances of mob lynching have been increasing over different issues and this targeting the vulnerable as well as marginal sections of the society. In this respect, the Supreme Court has already ordered to make a special law to deal with cases of mass lynching. And the court has also ordered to make mass lynching a separate offense. And as per the directions of the Supreme Court, the central government has issued directives to all state governments to take necessary action with respect to preventing such cases of mass lynching. As the central government has said that police as well as public order forms a part of state list under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution and has also asked respective state governments to take stringent actions as per law so as to create a deterrent effect. So, accordingly, to formulate appropriate measures to address the situation of mass lynching, the government has set up a high level committee to be chaired by the Union Home Secretary. This committee will deliberate upon the matter as well as make suitable recommendations with respect to preventing cases of mass lynching in near future. The other members of this high level committee, chaired by Union Home Secretary, would be the Secretary Department of Justice, Secretary to the Department of Legal Affairs, Secretary to the Legislative Department, as well as Secretary to Social Justice and Empowerment. And this committee shall submit its recommendations to the government within 4 weeks. Further, the government has also decided to constitute a group of ministers headed by the Union Home Minister to consider the recommendations of the high level committee. The members of this group of ministers would be Minister of External Affairs, Minister of Road Transport and Highways, Shipping, Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Regeneration, Minister Law and Justice, and Minister Social Justice and Empowerment. And this group of ministers will submit their recommendation to the Prime Minister of India. So we see, because of these instances of mass lynching, the government has set up a high-level committee to be chaired by the Home Secretary. And this committee will deliberate upon the issue of mass lynching and also suggest suitable recommendations so as to prevent cases of mass lynching in near future. Now this topic of mass lynching forms a part of governance under GS paper 2 as well as a security issue under GS paper 3, specifically role of media, social networking sites in internal security challenges. So after going through this discussion of high level committee chaired by the Union Secretary on mass lynching, let's go through this particular question. It says instances of mass lynching and prevailing mobocracy signals failure of governance at ground level by appropriate authorities, suggest suitable measures which must be taken by the government to prevent such instances of mass lynching. So I'm sure after going through this discussion and various other discussions in the previous DNS videos, you would be able to attempt these kind of questions. Now the committee will be submitting its report within 4 weeks, so let's wait and watch what the committee has to suggest so as to prevent cases of mass lynching. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news also appears on page number 1 and appears as a continuation on page number 10. The news is about ban on protest at city's iconic Jantar Mantar boat club lifted. Now this news is with respect to the fundamental right of freedom of speech and expression and also right to protest. And this judgment with respect to right to protest become extremely important because as you can see, a question has already been asked by UPSC in the year 2014. The question asked was, what do you understand by the concept freedom of speech and expression? Does it cover hate speech also? Why do films in India stand on a slightly different plane from other forms of expression? Discuss. So we see that these issues of fundamental rights, specifically of freedom of speech and expression, becomes extremely crucial from an exam point of view. So in this news, let us understand what the Supreme Court has said with respect to the concept of right to protest. Supreme Court has said that right to protest is recognized as a fundamental right under the Constitution and this right is crucial in democracy. And in this, the court had further said that legitimate dissent is a distinguishable feature of any democracy. Thus, effectively, the Supreme Court has held right to protest as a part of fundamental right, including right to dissent. It further says that every individual or group, whether they are minority or poor or marginalized, have the right to express their dissent to government policies and fight their social circumstances. Now, this again becomes an extremely crucial observation of the Supreme Court, that every section of the society, irrespectively, have the right to express their dissent to the government policies and fight their social circumstances. And in this respect, it is the right to fight at a location within hearing distance of the power centers. So in this news, the Supreme Court has basically lifted the right to protest at Jantar Mantar, which earlier was banned because of a judgment of National Green Tribunal. And with respect to right to protest, the court has said that all that is required of them is to protest in an orderly and peaceful manner. So these two words become again very important, that is orderly as well as peaceful manners. So from here we can understand that everyone has a right to protest subject to reasonable restriction as provided under Article 19 Clause 2 to 19 Clause 6. The Supreme Court in this case has further observed that protests strengthen representative democracy by enabling direct participation in public affairs, where individuals and groups are able to express dissent and grievances, expose the flaws in governance, and demand accountability from state authorities as well as powerful entities. So all these reasons for protest in a representative democracy becomes extremely crucial, as it allows them to express dissent and grievances, expose the flaws in governance, and demand accountability from state authorities as well as powerful entities. However, in this judgment, the Supreme Court has recognized that the reason for such a ban by NGT was correct, as the protesters at times become unruly and have been a source of noise and air pollution, which effectively made life difficult for the common citizens of that particular locality. Thus, interestingly, the Supreme Court has observed that in a democracy, balance of fundamental rights of the residents as well as demonstrators is extremely necessary. Thus, the Supreme Court has observed that right to protest is fundamental. However, such rights cannot impede other people's rights, including the citizens residing in the area. So, in this article, we have mentioned about freedom of speech and expression. So, let us also understand the grounds of reasonable restrictions. It says, like other fundamental rights, freedom of speech and expression include protest, is not absolute and is subject to sovereignty and integrity of the country, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency or morality, or in relation to contempt of court, and defamation or incitement to an offense. So these are the grounds on which the government or the state authorities can impose reasonable restriction with respect to freedom of speech and expression. And the purpose of this restriction is twofold. That is, they specify that these freedoms are not absolute but are subject to certain regulations on the grounds which we have just seen above. And secondly, they also put a limitation on the power of the legislature to restrict these freedoms. So it works both ways, that it works as a regulation on the citizens as well as it also works as a reasonable restriction on the government to legislate on grounds of reasonable restriction. And this ground of reasonable restriction becomes open to the concept of judicial review. Hence, to adjudge reasonableness of restriction, the courts consider the following factors, namely duration and extent of the restrictions, circumstances under which and the manner in which such imposition has been authorized, nature of the right infringed when such restrictions are imposed, extent and urgency of the evil sought to be remedied through such restrictions, and the degree of reasonable restriction imposed based on prevailing circumstances. So we see that this concept of reasonable restrictions becomes very subjective and at times becomes open to judicial review. So this concept of reasonable restriction becomes extremely important as it is not only subjective but is also open to judicial review. So this Supreme Court judgment on right to protest becomes extremely crucial from our exam point of view, as we have already seen that UPSC has asked a question in GS paper 2 in the year 2014. Now this news also mentions about Jantar Mantar. Let's learn certain few basic facts about Jantar Mantar. So between 1724 and 1730, Maharaja Savai Jai Singh II of Jaipur constructed 5 astronomical observations. So these Jantar Mantars are astronomical observations. These observatories or Jantar Mantars, as they are commonly called, incorporate multiple buildings of unique form each with a specialized function for astronomical measurement. And these astronomical observations are based on certain astronomical measurement or calculations. So there are 5 Jantar Mantars in India, of which the largest is in Jaipur, which features many instruments along with world's largest stone sundial. And this Jantar Mantar at Jaipur is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. However, this picture is that of Delhi. And the 5 Jantar Mantars built are at New Delhi, Jaipur, Ujjain, Mathura, and Varanasi. So these Jantar Mantars are astronomical observatories with multiple buildings of unique form, each having a specialized function for astronomical measurement. Thus, this news about right to protest as well as certain facts about Jantar Mantar become extremely important from our exam point of view. The right to protest forms a part of GS paper 2, whereas certain facts about Jantar Mantar forms a part of GS paper 1, specifically under Indian heritage and culture. Thus, this news becomes extremely important for us to understand from mains point of view. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 3. It's about the 10th BRICS Summit, which is to be held in Johannesburg in South Africa. It says BRICS embraces a second golden decade. So as you can see, BRICS includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, as well as South Africa. And the theme for the 10th BRICS Summit is BRICS in Africa, collaboration for inclusive growth and shared prosperity in the fourth industrial revolution. This theme is reflective of the core priorities of each one of the BRICS members, notably to strive towards creation of an inclusive society and global partnership that will bring prosperity to all humankind. So effectively, this ongoing BRICS Summit is all about creating an inclusive society as well as a stress on global partnerships. And in this respect, the new areas of BRICS cooperation as proposed by South Africa are establishment of a working group on peacekeeping, establishment of a vaccine research center, establishment of BRICS Gender and Women's Forum, pursuing inclusive growth and advancing the fourth industrial revolution, as well as establishment of a BRICS tourism track of cooperation. So all these becomes new areas of BRICS cooperation. And this 10th BRICS Summit is supposed to take place from 25th to 27th of July in Johannesburg in South Africa. So let us understand the significant role played by BRICS over the period of certain years. It has laid a firm foundation of BRICS on the global scale. It has taken efforts to tackle the issue of climate change. It has also helped in promoting the issue of sustainable development. It created a new development bank, which is its financial arm, in the year 2015. And the new development bank is headquartered at Shanghai. And this new development arm has helped in financing projects for both climate change as well as to promote sustainable development issues. The new development bank has helped BRICS to honor its commitment to the Paris Climate Deal as well as in pursuing the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. BRICS members have increased representation of developing countries at the IMF as well as at the World Bank. And this increase in representation has made the bloc representing about 40% of global population and a quarter of the world economy. And through this, the BRICS also aims to enhance its global presence. So BRICS representation in IMF and in World Bank makes 40% of global population and a quarter of the world economy. And through this, BRICS also aims to enhance its global presence in the world economy. BRICS members also aims to enhance global governance through reduction in property, which is also one of the aim of UN Sustainable Development Agenda. BRICS has also reaffirmed the centrality of the United Nations, World Trade Organization, as well as international law. And through this also aims at greater representation of emerging markets and developing countries in global decision making as well as global governance. Thus, effectively, BRICS aims for an open and inclusive world economy. So this news on BRICS becomes very important for us to understand as questions in prelims have been asked previously. Now this particular question was asked in the prelims of 2016. The question read, consider the following statements. New Development Bank has been set up by APEC. No, this statement is incorrect, as we have just seen that New Development Bank has been set up by BRICS. The headquarters of New Development Bank is in Shanghai. This is correct. So which of the statements given above is correct? Two only. So here B is the correct answer. Thus, we see that BRICS become an important issue and questions have been asked by UPSC specifically on BRICS or recent development with respect to BRICS. Here, a question was asked on new development ban. So, this upcoming 10th BRICS Summit to be held in Johannesburg becomes extremely important as it involves important stakeholders in the meeting such as China, Russia, Brazil, as well as South Africa. As far as the syllabus is concerned, this forms a part of GS Paper 2 under International Relations and specifically under bilateral, regional, and global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interest. So let's wait and watch for the further development on 10th meeting of BRICS. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 8 in the editorial section. The news reads, Stimulus mode, GST cuts reflect buoyancy, but center states cooperation must be maintained. So in this editorial, the Goods and Service Tax Council has announced a reduction in the tax rates of over 85 goods, and some of these reductions pertains to consumer durables. In this respect, let us see some of the important items on which GST has been reduced, and we will also see the impact of reduction of GST. Now it says that slash of tax from 18% to 12% in consumer durable products. So what are these consumer durables products? These consumer durables are a category of consumer products that do not have to be purchased frequently because they are made to last for an extended period of time, typically for more than 3 years. So this concept of consumer durables becomes extremely important, and GST has been slashed from 18% to 12%. Further, tax rate on environment-friendly fuel cell vehicles have been reduced from 18% to 12%, and the compensation cess levied on them have been dropped. Now, these compensation cess are levied on certain notified goods in additional to GST. Further, sanitary napkins have been exempted totally from any tax, and several other products have been placed in the lower tax slabs, including those from the employment-intensive sectors such as handicrafts as well as carpets. So these are some of the products on which GST rates have been slashed. Now let us understand the impact of reduction of GST rates. It says that the recent tax rate is expected to significantly alter the GST tax regime. Further, it will change prices of various products, and this may drive consumption ahead of the festive season. So one of the main aim of GST tax reduction is to increase consumption in the economy. It further says rate reduction at such a scale level also shows government's comfortability with revenue yield from GST. Now, reduction at such a level does impact revenue of the government. However, the government seems confident enough because of this increase in consumption in the economy, and hence it's comfortable with the revenue yield from GST. It further says that if implemented well, the revenue loss which is being estimated by experts could be offset by higher consumption that may lead to more investments over time. Further, improvements in compliance can be expected from the GST Council decision to further simplify paperwork for small and medium enterprises. So these are some of the impacts of reduction of GST rates. Thus we see the government seems confident enough for further GST yield, and because of this it has announced tax reduction in more than 85 products. This editorial on GST cut forms a part of GS Paper 3 specifically on economic development and Indian economy and issues relating to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. So let's wait and watch how this reduction in tax rates helps in improving the consumption in the economy. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 9. It reads, short spells of heavy showers, mini cloud bursts are increasing in India. Now, in this particular news, Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology at Pune has of late witnessed an increase in heavy rainfall of short durations during summer monsoon in many places. So for this, Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology at Pune have coined a new term to define such events, and they have termed as mini cloud burst. So in mini cloud burst, the rainfall is of very short duration and is defined as rainfall in excess of 50 mm in 2 consecutive hours. So these mini cloud bursts are indicative of torrential downforce, but of lower intensity than a regular cloud burst. In such instances of mini cloud burst, rate of water accumulation exceeds that of absorption level. So this increased rate of water accumulation than absorption level further increases the probability of flash flood to 3 times. So this mini cloudburst is an indicative of torrential downpour, however having lower intensity than a regular cloudburst. And in such cases of mini cloudburst, rate of water accumulation is much higher as compared to the absorption level. And this further increases the probability of having a flash flood more than 3 times. A study conducted on mini cloudbursts has found that they are most prevalent in the foothills of Himalayas. For the western coast, the study has said that it records more than 3 mini cloudbursts per season. The study further says that Indo-Gangetic Plain and the Saurashtra region records roughly 2 mini cloudbursts per season. And Rajasthan as well as states east of Western Ghats receive 1 mini cloudburst per season. So the study have categorized these mini cloudbursts as per different regions in the country. Now in this respect, it is also interesting to know that the Indian Meteorological Department has classified rainfall on a 24-hour basis. Let's understand the classification. The classification of the IMD, that is Indian Meteorological Department, is heavy over 60.5 mm of rainfall. If it is over 130 mm of rainfall, then it is categorized as very heavy. And if the rainfall is over 200 mm, then it is categorized as extremely heavy. So this is the categorization of rainfall as per the Indian Meteorological Department on a 24-hour basis. So in this news we saw about a new term known as mini cloudburst. So this news becomes very interesting from an exam point of view, as such terms may be asked either in prelims or even the mains examination. As far as the syllabus is concerned, it forms part of GS paper 1, specifically under important geophysical phenomena. This news on short spells of heavy showers become extremely important from our exam point of view. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 11. The news reads, Prime Minister in Africa amid a fall in trade. While India's investment have fallen, China has ramped up its presence on the continent, that is in Africa. Now here, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is currently on a 2 to 3 countries of Africa, namely Rwanda, Uganda as well as South Africa. So according to the World Investment Report 2018 by UNCTAD, that is United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, India's FDI in Africa was at $16 billion in 2011-12, but now has dropped to $14 billion in 2016-17. So we have witnessed a drop of roughly $2 billion with respect to trade with Africa. However, China's investment has increased from $16 billion in 2011-12 to $40 billion in 2016-17. So here we see a contrast. On the one side, our investment has dipped to $2 billion, whereas investment of China has increased from $16 billion to that of $40 billion. So China has invested significantly in Africa over the last few years. Similarly, India's international trade with Africa has also decreased from $67 billion in 2013 to $51 billion in 2017, while China's has crossed $170 billion in 2017. So here, in terms of these statistics, we can understand the difference of investment between India and that of China. That China has leaped ahead in terms of investing in Africa as compared to India. Further, it says India's FDI in Africa was roughly equal to China's in 2011-12, ensuring a parity of both emerging economies in Africa. However, India has shown a deterioration in economic ties, thereby losing economic competitiveness to China in Africa. So the emphasis of this particular news is that India has lost economic competitiveness to China with respect to its investment, as in the year 2011-12, comparatively, both the country, that is India and China, were on equal footing, ensuring a parity of emerging economies in Africa. However, over the recent period of years, China has significantly improved or increased its investment in Africa, whereas India has lost the economic competitiveness. These are the causes which can be attributed to less investment in Africa. They can be lack of emerging companies in India outreaching to African markets, that is, less company going to African markets. Africa has seen a global decline in FDI inflows with a drop of 21% in 2016-17. So it says that Africa has seen an effective global decline in FDI inflows. It further says India's trade with Africa mainly relies on petroleum and LNG, that is liquefied natural gas, and therefore requires diversification. Further, India's trade in Africa is localized to countries of East Africa and require further expansion to other regions of Africa. So these can be some of the causes attributable to less investment in the entire African region. However, currently the Prime Minister of India is on a 2 to 3 countries of Africa. So let's wait and watch how the economic development shape up with the recent visit of our Prime Minister. This topic forms a part of GS paper 2 under international relations, specifically under India and its neighborhood relations. Since this is a developing story, let's wait and watch for further development. With this, let's move on to the next news. Now the next news appears on page number 7. The news reads, Karnataka sees a 300% jump in FDI inflows. Tamil Nadu also sees a rebound. And it says services sector still on top despite 23% drop. So as per the RBI data, Karnataka has registered the biggest increase in FDI last year as inflows jumped 300% in the 12 months till March 2018. And in this respect, even Tamil Nadu witnessed a FDI surge. However, states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh witnessed a drop in FDI inflow. Sector-wise data show that computer hardware as well as computer software gained roughly 68% jump in FDI flow. As you can also see in this particular picture, FDI inflows patterns. It says boosted by high FDI in software and hardware sector in 2017-18, Karnataka has attracted a high FDI inflow than previous year. Graph shows change in FDI in 2017-18 compared to 2016-17 across various RBI offices. And in this graph, they have said that states above the trend line showed increased FDI inflows with a green circle and those below the lower inflows in a red circle. And says higher the percentage increase in FDIs, bigger is the circle. So we can see that biggest circle here is in Chandigarh, Kanpur, Bhubaneswar, Guwahati, Kolkata, Bangalore, Chennai. So all these have greater FDI inflows. However, places like Kochi, Jaipur, Panaji, Bhopal and Patna, they are states with lower FDI inflows. So we understand that FDI becomes important for a growing economy. Seeing the sector-wise inflow in 2017-18, services sector, telecommunications, software and hardware, trading and even construction sector received increased FDI. So let us go through some of the important benefits of FDI in an economy. As you can see, it says that FDI is critical for developing economies as it brings more capital in different sectors. It further says infusion of capital further helps in transfer of capital as well as technical knowledge. So infusion of more capital, that is more money, also helps in bringing better technical knowledge. Further it says such infusion of capital also helps in job creation in the market. So this again becomes one of the most important aspect of benefits of FDI. It further says good investments also bring good return for the investors. So if the investors are getting good return, then they will definitely want to invest more in such growing economy. Further, more FDI improves credit worthiness of the economy on a global scale. So if a country is receiving more FDI from different countries, then definitely its credit worthiness improves. And further, more infusion of capital further helps in increasing competition in the market, which effectively encourages innovations and startups and also help in improving efficiency in the market. So these can be said to be some of the benefits of having more FDI in an economy. Thus, this news of FDI inflow patterns becomes significant from our exam point of view. As far as the syllabus is concerned, it forms a part of GS paper 3 under economic development. Thus, this news on FDI inflow patterns and as well as benefits of FDI becomes very important from our exam point of view. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for daily DNS updates. With this, let's move on to the question for the day.